When they land in the water, we actually get separate splash effects for each one of those cannons. I mean, oh yeah, okay, is this infinite? Here's mobile Windows 95. Not bad. Looks better than liquid glass. Google has released Gemini 3.1 Pro, which we can see is listed as a smarter model for our most complex tasks. Now, in kind of traditional fashion, I've been finding this is a relatively short announcement post for the model, but it does drive home some main capability increases that I think folks will be interested in, specifically in terms of a core intelligence or logic capability increase. And we see right here, and this is the first thing I want to specifically bring up, is they mention right here on ArcAGI2, a benchmark that evaluates a model's ability to solve entirely new logic patterns. 3.1 Pro achieved a score of 77.1 versus the previous model 3 Pro, which was 31.1. So this represents a very drastic increase in capability, at least based on this one specific benchmark. And they do even mention that some of the intelligence that is imbued inside this model is also kind of what we saw with the updated and recently released Gemini 3 DeepThink, which we did test, and it was an extremely impressive model. So they even say, we're releasing the upgraded core intelligence that makes those breakthroughs possible, Gemini 3.1 Pro. And I find it cool that down here they're talking about its intelligence, and they use a bunch of animated SVGs as an example, some of which are kind of funny in my opinion. Not this. Hold on. I think it would just have to cycle through, but they have one that's like a... How am I forgetting the name of this creature? This thing. Is a chameleon. Yeah, good. I just find that one hilarious. And then we can see there's definitely a stark increase in the quality of the animated SVG, which I definitely would be interested in trying as well. Then they just say what's next, and they basically talk about its availability and how user feedback is important and things of the sort. So with that, two things. One, feel free to follow me on X so I can become large on this platform as well. Bijan would appreciate. I don't know, I don't like pandering to folks, so it's always uncomfortable for me to mention it, so I try to just slide it in. So the second thing is, I don't know how specifically folks want me to test this model. I personally use this model every day, and I just use it through this Gemini.google.com/app platform, though I have in the past seen comments from folks saying it performs better or at least can output longer code if you use it through the Google AI Studio. I don't specifically know if that is the case. So let's begin with our browser OS test, and I'm going to specifically make sure that we do have 3.1 Pro selected, which is listed as the model under Pro here, so that is good. Additionally, I am going to also enable Canvas, which folks have said can allow it to produce more code or something of the sort. I've at least been told that in comments in previous Gemini testing videos. So this is of course our browser OS v2, where it must make at least 5 applications. I have slightly modified the prompt, so one of the games that it makes has to be 3D. So of the 5 applications, 2 must be games. It should have the ability to change wallpaper and a special feature that it decides upon and implements and tells us why it's special. Now, to this point, I've had folks mention that in the Google AI Studio, if you use that instead, the results can be more impressive. And we see I ran the same exact prompt in here because I wanted to verify that for myself. The problem is it ended up making 14 specific files for the same prompt, which does specifically denote it should be all in a single script. So while this may produce interesting results in and of itself, at least for this specific test, I'm going to opt to not use this because it did not at all adhere to our prompt telling it to just make one script. So here is our browser OS with Gemini 3.1 Pro. All right, initializing kernel. Very interesting. It's opted for a rather dark background aesthetic, but we do also have a Mac OS style center dock, and I do like the way these icons are animated, at least in terms of the hover effects. Now, there is no right click. I'm actually initially going to just try to make sure. Are there any issues with this? No. So the background is just by default rather dark. I think that's probably the first thing. Okay, so that specific background image is just broken. That was attributable to that. I think I'll probably go with this. Okay. And we don't have a right click, but we do have our menu bar, which is actually in the top of the screen, and it does have the clock with the correct time in our locale. Notes, type your thoughts. Hi, bro. Save to RAM. Notes saved to virtual disk. Okay. Full screen does not. All right. I'm pretty sure that, like... Okay, so the issue with this snake game is the arrow is also... Because we can't expand this to be the correct length for the game to appear without a scroll bar on the side, the down arrow is simultaneously controlling the snake as well as the scroll bar, which makes for a rather complicated additional difficulty in playing this game, though for someone like myself who is just massively skilled in Snake, it's not like hit or miss, but we have a score. Let's check the 3D game that it would have implemented. That actually looks pretty good. Now, I don't exactly know what the heck is going on here. And 3D tunnel. Okay, so maybe this is just a static 3D experience and perhaps less than a game, but it does look kind of cool being that the background we have chosen to use is also similar to this in aesthetic. Interesting. Settings, we were already there. We have our system information as well. And then the final thing we see down here appears to be some form of keyboard logo. Oh, our terminal. Okay. Type help to see special commands. Matrix. Okay. Very interesting. So it gave us some interesting secret.txt. There's like no file browser here, so I don't think we'd be able to actually find secret.txt, which is regrettable. So now we're going to try the 3D printer simulation test. I do believe it will fare better than what we received previously. And again, I mean, doing them in here in the AI Studio is also somewhat of an option, but the fact is it's not really adhering to keeping everything in one single script, which adds a level of difficulty. On the downside of it can be less potentially potent, but part of the test is just seeing what they can do within the constraints of what they're given, such as a single script. So we'll see how this goes, and then we may decide to run some of these tests as well in here, just keeping in mind that we'll just use them through the canvas that gets appeared in the AI Studio. All right, so here is our 3D printer simulation. All right, we do have our nozzle, we do have the gantry, and a rather large bed. This reminds me of like a Creality CR6 Max, was it, or something? The 400mm printers. Okay. I'm not entirely sure what's gone wrong, so I'm just trying to do some experimentation here in terms of even trying to have it generate without Canvas enabled. Additionally to that, I did go into the AI Studio, which folks have said it will do better at producing results in, and it gave us this specific 3D printer, which definitely looks better, but the fact is it doesn't necessarily properly adhere to the prompt because it ends up making a ton of different files. Nevertheless, I think I'm just going to try to experiment with this one. Okay, this is definitely a bit better, though I do have to say, I still think the Gemini 3 Pro result I received for this specific test was better than both of these. And to that point, I'll show it just so the audience can judge as well. I did this without Canvas enabled, and we'll just see how this result fares comparatively. Having Canvas enabled, although I'm going to be honest with you, this is significantly better in terms of realism because it did actually do the base of this shape, and it is going layer by layer. So the 3D printer here is perhaps not as detailed from a model standpoint, but this is actually a pretty realistic result because it did draw that first layer on the ground, and to that point we can almost see what is reflective in terms of the lines there, at least when we zoom in and out, of how a first layer would actually look. So I now want to try. Okay, so it just starts automatically with that, but this is something called vase mode in 3D printers is kind of like this, where it just prints like one wall and it just keeps going continuously. That's very interesting because this is a better result than I think what we received definitely with this one, even though the printer is not as molded. Almost if the two of these were combined, we would have received a better result. I'm now giving it the 3D Flight Combat Simulator game. I would expect to get a pretty fun to play result from this, and this is a pretty standard test that I like to perform on this channel. So we'll see how it does, and then I always have to kind of like hide the result from my viewport because I don't want to see it until we open it natively in the browser. And to this, I don't want to run every single specific test with the AI Studio as well, because back-to-back is kind of like, I don't know, we like testing one model in one specific interface, but I'll kind of just keep this on the back burner just in case. All right, so let's check out our 3D Flight Combat Simulator, Skyward Strike, Swift Interceptor, Classic Warbird, or the Phantom Wing. Good. This is, you know, I'm going to say the flight mechanics on this are actually quite nice to play, and I do see ammunition traces. I think I crashed. That's okay. That happens. The clouds are pretty cool. They're like interesting cubes. We have nice information. Damn. Okay, this flight logic is pretty cool. And it did this in around 500 lines of code. So something I noticed when I tested the Gemini DeepThink model that had just come out recently is the results it was producing were very performant in so few lines of code, which was really rather impressive to see. Now, I can't specifically see the enemies, but I do in fact see ammunition coming like, okay, all right. I like this plane model. It's very simple. It reminds me of like the Legos for kids. What are those? Like Mega Blocks? No, those are the rip-off Legos. The I don't remember what they're called, but this reminds me of like a Top Gun scene here, the way I'm able to flip around over this enemy plane. Now, regrettably, I can't really seem to get at them, but the movement of this aircraft is rather impressive. I think I'm going to try the final plane. Okay, so it's just like different color ones, but the acrobatics of these craft are rather impressive. So I'm giving Gemini just some feedback. I said, what exactly is this garbage? Make it way better in all regards. So it's now going to give us a major upgrade. And I'm also running it through the AI Studio here just to see what the differential in result we receive is, keeping in mind that this will do it in a bunch of different scripts instead. Interesting. So the script became shorter after I told Gemini, like, WTF is this, make it better. Okay, we definitely have a much more aesthetic user interface. Just, whoa. All right, this is funky. Look at that. That style is kind of cool. We even actually have city buildings. We have an altimeter here, and I did hit the ground, and we did actually properly fail there. The planes are still wild in terms of their control, and the city landscape is actually neat. I've never, in doing this game, seen an actual like city-style landscape. It's always just a blank mountainous terrain or something like that. I don't necessarily see any enemies, but I do see ammunition flying past me, so they're definitely there. Okay, I did just see one, and unfortunately I did hit the ground. We'll try. Okay, good. And these plane models are actually different now, so look at the, I mean, the aeronautics, I don't know if that's a word. It is, but I don't know if the plane's ability to move is very interesting. So, all right, now let's see what we were to receive in our Google AI Studio result, keeping in mind, okay, wow. Yeah, all right, so this does make a rather big difference just in terms of pretty much everything, because we see this plane model is far more detailed, although I'm not sure I see ammunition tracers, and the map is just kind of a basic grid, but the flight logic seems good. Oh, okay. At least in terms of the enemies. Wasted. Oh, wow. Okay, interesting. Again, I just wanted to showcase the results from both, as folks had mentioned previously to do so. I'm going to now just ask it to create an animated SVG of a 3D printer. I did see in some of the examples folks were sending it really simple prompts like this in terms of getting it to create SVGs, and it did do a nice job of doing so. So it'll be interesting, especially considering the animated SVG is something they prominently chose to display in the announcement release post for this model. That is fantastic. Look at that. This is arguably better than the 3D printer test result we received. I mean, it's showing the actual shape go up as the nozzle goes up. The printer is drawn well as well. We actually do even have a little spinny thing on the nozzle, which is something you see on like the Bamboo Labs printer now. Bamboo Lab, not Labs, but that is very, very good. Now I'm going to give it the test to create a beautifully detailed web scene of a subway station. All right, let's take a look at our static subway scene, initializing station infrastructure. That is wonderful. That's very nicely done, and it is rather realistic. The camera movement is a bit wonky, but the lighting is nice. The actual textures of the ground and things of the sort are nice as well. I'm noticing there's not necessarily a ton of like accessories in here, meaning trash cans and things of the sort. We do have way outbound section, or whatever that would specifically be designed to say, and the tracks are actually nicely drawn as well. There is a bunch of yellow warning things like don't step over this or you'll go on the tracks. We have a bench. The lights look nice. This was a very, very good result. Now, I've seen folks saying this thing's really good at front end just in stuff I see on X, so I'm giving it the Stevie Slappis portfolio wireframe, and I'm going to tell it to turn it into a fantastic aesthetic portfolio website. And we'll see how it does. You know, I'm going to say it did very much adhere to the outline of the wireframe we gave it, so it kept everything arranged as it was in that, and to be honest with you, I think in the low amount of lines of code that it actually used here, this is not bad at all. I probably would like something a little more aesthetically pleasing, which I may do a secondary prompt here to tell it, like, it doesn't have to specifically look like the wireframe. But specializing the intersection of LLMs and autonomous reasoning, we have some skills here, and they are nicely arranged. Core competencies: LLM fine-tuning and distributed training. Server, US 1 East, or US East 1 stable. And then we have GitHub for Slappis AI and contact at stevielapis.ai. Okay, interesting. I'm just saying make it far more impressive and pretty. All right, here is our improved portfolio result. Oh, initiating neural weights, Stevie. Okay, this is definitely a bit more impressive. Security level clearance, Omega, Stevie Lapis, Senior AI Research Engineer and Neural Architect. All right, executive summary. It is definitely still very similar stylistically to the previous result. It just looks a bit better and more lively, if you will. And we do have this rotating Stevie thing, and it definitely leaned into the tech aesthetic here. So overall, not bad, and it did still very much kind of stick to what was drawn in the wireframe, almost perhaps to a degree that inhibited the quality of the generated result. All right, let's try some different languages. So we're just trying the Python 3D first-person shooter. It should have a functional minimap, visible trace and munition effects, and a functional health bar. It is also specifically told not to use Ursina. All right, let's check our Python game, UltraPython FPS. Okay, press space to start. This is cool. Oh, well, I think I lost. I don't think the game crashed. Oh, okay, never mind. I think I clicked out of it then. So those are our enemies, and they are coming at us. I just don't know how to shoot. All right, I saw some ammunition trace effects, and I'm going to say the map here is pretty interesting. The big problem is the mouse is going outside of the game window. It's not necessarily locked inside the window, so I'm a bit restricted in terms of what I can do. But the movement I'm noticing in the minimap is actually kind of funny. So I'll try to rely more on the arrow keys to move. And can I actually get any of these? No. But my health bar is working, so let's just let the health bar run out and then we'll see. Okay, space to start. All right, and then I just clicked out of it because the mouse doesn't lock into the game. Next, I want to try the C++ skateboarding game, which is definitely a result that's always fun to play, generally. Gemini also had one of the historically most funny results for this ever. I think it was the previous DeepThink model, not the one I just tested, but the one that came prior to that. So we'll see how it does. Why do they do this? You know, this happens. I've developed a skateboarding game to ensure the game is immediately playable. I've done it instead in HTML5 and 3JS. I don't want that. You know, this is interesting behavior that I've noticed because many different models from many different laboratories have seen this same prompt and decided they're just going to use HTML instead. They're not going to make it in C++. This is a very interesting behavior that's almost reminiscent of like some form of laziness. So yeah, this is a really cool result. I like it, but it is not at all what I wanted. So I'm going to be sarcastic. I said, did I say C++? And we'll see what it does. Haha, you definitely did. I apologize. Yeah, you better. All right, so we've received an error when trying to build this specific code, so I'll just ask it to fix it. What did this name this? Okay, skate game. Interesting how it's like actually a very similar color palette to the one that it made for the web. So interesting. It's pretty simple. I'm not seeing, oh, okay, that kickflip is actually pretty cool. Can we get on the rail and grind? I don't think that is properly implemented. Oh, good. Okay, so we actually can. It's just pretty hard to get on there. Sorry, let me move the mouse out of the game window. This is difficult. All right, it did do it. And it kept the color palette that it had initially when it deferred to just doing HTML instead. Let's try the drum kit simulation test now, where it has to create a drum kit simulator with proper sounds and arrangement. It can use 2.5D photorealistic assets or 3D. Start session. Very good. The assets look good. The arrangement is actually very good in terms of where these would be in real life. This is probably one of the better arrangements I've seen. Oh yeah, and that slaps as well, so let me just test all the sounds. And we do have like animations on the drums to show that they're actually being played. That floor tom sounds very lifelike. That's one of the more realistic floor toms I've ever heard in this test. Phil Collins test time. Solid. Thank you. That was very good. The sounds were good, the arrangement of the drums were good, as well as the models were not bad as well. So I'm doing the ship combat simulator now, but at the same time, I'm going to run this through the AI Studio as well, because I do want to see specifically just a nice head-to-head for folks to see the difference in generated result between using this from either interface. So first up, our ship combat simulator just run with canvas enabled. Naval strike. All right, deploy vessel. This is fantastic. Okay, well... Sometimes the ships are a bit fast. This is definitely one of those cases. However, I'm going to say this water effect is by far the best water effect I've ever seen in any of my tests of models ever. Now, in terms of cannons, how do I... okay, so Q and E. Wow, where did this result come from? Because this is really good. Okay, obviously, yes, the issue is that perhaps the actual enemy ship is very fast, but look at the individual cannonball effects. When they land in the water, we actually get separate splash effects for each one of those cannons. I mean, oh yeah, okay, is this infinite? This is, wow, this is well done. Ship drift. All right, this is begging to be a jet ski simulator if I have ever seen a result such. So we're going to do a follow-up test there because this result is absolutely begging to instead become a jet ski simulator. It's infinite. This is definitely the best terrain result I've seen in doing this test, and the individual effects for the cannonballs hitting the water. All right, let's check out the jet ski simulator Apex Rider. Yes, this is exactly what I wanted. Oh, maybe not. All right. Well, so the wave height effect is sadly not 100% working. And now the jet ski speed is, oh, look, we jumped over a invisible wave, but nonetheless, it was a wave. Okay, well, I think we will need to call a rescue crew for our jet ski rider, but regardless, very interesting. Now let's go back and just check the result we had received from doing this in Canvas instead, where we can see it made a significant increase in the amount of files. So launch vessel. Okay, well, yeah, so I'll be testing it just through here. Let's just try some more animated SVGs, ensuring I do have 3.1 Pro selected. So I'm asking it for an animated skateboarder SVG. All right. Not bad at all. Interactive SVG animation. Well, interactive meaning like it moves. If you move your mouse over the screen, the skateboarder will subtly tilt, adding a 3D perspective effect. It does. Okay, that's very, very difficult to see, but when the mouse goes over the screen here, we do actually see the rider move. So it created for us an interactive skateboarding SVG. That is pretty neat. I want to try like a subway station SVG now. All right, let's check our subway station SVG. Not bad. We had the train arrive at the station. It is right around 13 o'clock. Hey, it's actually showing me the actual time in my locale, so that's nice as well. Is the train going to leave the station as well? It does indeed. And then we have some floating particle effects and things like that. It seems like we also have lights that are somewhat flickerish, which is cool to see. Yep, that is the correct time in the locale. Okay, not bad at all. All right, so we're going to give it this photo, which has become a mainstay on the channel of myself with this AI generated individual. It was AI generated, but it's kind of me. So I'm telling it, this is the cover of an upcoming romance novel. Make a gorgeous website for this book, including the name and an overview of the story that will hook the readers. There should also be a pre-sale section, and make it something feature-packed that will hook in readers. Spending quite a decent amount of time analyzing this, so it will be rather interesting to see what we get from this. I already see a heart's true compass, okay? That's the only thing I'm going to look at for now. All right, let's check out our romance novel. Oh, it's not showing the photo. Okay, regardless, this website actually looks very good. The big issue, of course, is that the actual photo is not shown here in the book cover. Regardless, when words fail, the heart remembers. A hauntingly beautiful journey of rediscovery between Marcus and Elena, proving that even the longest silence can be broken by the quietest truth. Joined by 1.2K readers in Read Sample Chapter, yes, Chapter 1, The Silence. The grandfather clock in the hallway was the only thing speaking now. Its rhythmic click-clack felt like a metronome for a song Elena no longer knew how to sing. Marcus sat by the window, the morning light catching the gray in his hair, his eyes fixed on the garden he had stopped tending weeks ago. Coffee? Elena whispered. The word hung in the air, heavy and unmoored. He didn't turn, he didn't blink, he just reached for the cold rim of his empty mug. Read the full chapter. Sarah J. Sterling is a best-selling author known for her unflinching honesty when exploring the complexities of human relationships. Over 2 million copies sold worldwide. This would be a photo, of course, of our author. We have a sign-up thing, a Heart's True Compass, press kit, and then digital escape. So for like a Kindle book, the hardcover classic or the author's circle. $75 for like a special feature one. A Heart's True Compass. Oh, okay. Elena and Marcus were the couple everyone envied. Their laughter filled the rooms of their vintage home, a sanctuary built on promises and shared dreams. But when a sudden tragedy strikes, the foundation of their world begins to crack. Marcus, once the anchor of Elena's life, Elena, retreats into a stoic silence she cannot penetrate. Elena, desperate to find the man who once looked at her with such tenderness, realizes that the path back to each other might require walking through the shadows they've both been avoiding. A Heart's True Compass is a visceral, emotionally resonant exploration of love in the wake of loss. It's a reminder that sometimes the hardest journey is the one that leads you back home. Overall, definitely not a bad website at all. All right, I'm back in this AI studio because I want to try something. Make a clone of Windows 95 desktop. And we'll just see what happens. As I've been seeing some pretty impressive results coming from this on the net, and I do assume they are made probably in some like AI studio like this, not necessarily just through the general chat interface. Nope, I don't want to, well, okay, we saw it live together. All right, my computer, start. We do have a clock with a little sound icon. We don't have a right click, but the start menu looks good, and it even says Windows 95. We have a few apps. My computer, C drive and D drive, which is the optical drive. Wow, something lost to time, I suppose, having an optical drive in a computer. Full screen minimize does work. Recycle bin, empty for now. Sounds somewhat threatening. Gemini AI. Welcome to Gemini AI Windows 95 edition. How can I help you manage your digital life today? Help. Connecting to cloud. Interesting. So it put in like a retro style. I've successfully booted up and my desktop icons are loaded. Help. It put in like a retro take on what a chatbot would look like back then. Interesting. My Pentium processor is revved up and ready to assist. I like that. Notepad. Very good. And finally, the calculator. Oh my goodness. There's no output. Okay, so the calculator doesn't quite work, but let's preview this on mobile. Very nice. Here's mobile Windows 95. Not bad. Looks better than liquid glass. All right, so I've given it this Arduino wiring diagram and said, turn this into an animated educational SVG. Okay, how it works. Then we have start system power. Very cool. Now, the motor shaft spinning around the center like that is a fairly common glitch to actually have when doing something like this, so that's almost to be expected. But we do even have the lights on this motor driver board in sync, which is pretty cool. We even have flowing like wires being emulated here, the electricity or the flow of information through them, so that's pretty cool. Overall, this definitely does have some very, very strong SVG capabilities, and that is pretty impressive to see. So I'm giving it this image of myself with the Honda Beat and saying turn this into an animated SVG. So it identified what this specific car was, and that's pretty interesting because a lot of times the models will not specifically get it right what this vehicle is, being that they'll think it's a Miata or something like that. So I'm actually pretty impressed with... Okay. I don't really like what it did to my hairline here, and it is very interesting the way that the wheel is... Spin wheels, suspension... Oh, reset view. Oh, suspension. You know, that is quite an animated SVG. And in terms of like what's realistically possible with this specific task in this source image, I would say it did a rather nice job of actually doing something with this. So, wow. So that's going to conclude our first look and testing of Gemini 3.1 Pro. This naval strike game, this water effect, and just the individual particle effects of the cannonballs landing in the water is significantly better than anything I've ever seen in this test by a very, very long shot. And then we'll have things like, but the 3D printer result was not necessarily as good as I know this model could have been able to create it, and I don't know what to make of that. When I turned Canvas off and did the 3D printer result, it actually made this, which was arguably a little better in terms of nozzle movement and realism, just the downside being that the printer itself was a little less kind of detailed. Our browser OS was, of course, pretty good, as they normally all are at this point, and it did put in a nice 3D game experience here, which, although I'm not not 100% sure what the point of it is. It was pretty cool, and it does have that 3D effect. There was no right click, but again, these are like, the terminal was pretty cool. It's just like, I felt like it was like slightly off from being high performance, I guess could be said. The jet ski pivot from the game was pretty fun and pretty cool. I did like the jet ski the jet ski model, as well as the rider. I think that was kind of neat. Obviously, the animated SVG capabilities were very, very good. The drum kit probably had arguably one of the best sounds, at least for the floor tom, in any of the results I've ever seen. Additionally, we had our Skyward Strike game, and this map that it made was really quite interesting, where it actually put buildings and a city, and this was the second iteration of this, when we had the first iteration as well, which was pretty cool and very block-like and simple. But I will say the flying mechanics were actually quite fun for these planes, and we can see the enemies coming in at us there, and it did have the shooting effects if we use the mouse to do so. So this was pretty cool, and it did properly have logic where if you hit the ground, like, that's game over. So surprisingly, that oftentimes is not necessarily implemented properly. Then we had our we had our subway station result, which was very well done. The tracks looked very realistic and to a good degree. Then finally, we just had like some portfolio websites from Wireframe, and of course we did a lot of animated SVG tests, which it did a fantastic job at. So overall, I don't have a definitive take on this, I suppose I could say, because it demonstrated some extremely potent capabilities here, but I almost do feel like it's in some way being somewhat handicapped in terms of the massive, or of the total potential amount that it can put out here. And the issue with using it, at least personally in this test for the AI Studio, is that it will just make 15 separate scripts to produce any single one of these results, which will be good, but at the same time negates comparing it to any other previous model I've tested on the channel, which I'm not very keen on doing that. I guess I don't 100% know what to say, but I did of course want to do a first look and test of Gemini 3.1 Pro, which based on those benchmarks of its reasoning capability increase is significantly more powerful than previous. So I think what I'm going to do is think up some more specific prompts for this model, perhaps, or just for the next generation of models, and I will keep that in mind in the culmination of some comparison video or something of the sort to make sure we're playing on fair ground and things like that when I do ultimately do something like that. So that's going to wrap it up. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments, and thanks for watching.